We're continuing our Founders Day panel discussions in celebration of our founder, Walter P. Lomax Jr., MD. Up next is Black Women Tech Innovators and Entrepreneurs, brought to you by Comcast and moderated by WURD President and CEO, Sara Lomax-Reese.
And we are back. We are here celebrating Founders Day at 1901 Vine Street, the central branch of the Free Library. It is 1:30. I've been here since 7:30, and this is like my favorite part of the program. I can kind of do what is fun, which is moderating a panel. Like, 'cause there's a lot of moving parts happening right about now, and I've been kind of, navigating a bunch of them. But I'm Sara Lomax-Reese, President and CEO of WURD, and I'm so excited to moderate this panel of Black women tech entrepreneurs, CEOs, movers and shakers, and really have like an honest, open conversation about what it is like to be in this game as Black women. And so we have a stellar panel assembled for today. And to my right, immediately to my right, is Tiffanie Stanard. And she is a techie, a creative, media personality, producer, and an award-winning entrepreneur with over 15 years of experience. Stanard has been named one of the 15 women changing the face of technology, Innovator of the Year, Visionary Leader to Watch, Top 20 Female Cloud Leaders in 2021, among many other honors. As a former executive in vendor management, Tiffanie saw the need to build more valuable supplier relationships and level the playing field for all companies. She is the founder, CEO of the Stimulus Relationship Intelligence Platform, or SRIP, which combines data insights, relationship building tools, and a proprietary score to help companies make the best purchasing decisions and optimize their supplier ecosystem. And she also used to work at WURD.
Yes.
So welcome, Tiffanie Stanard.
That's true. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here.
And next to Tiffanie is Brigitte Daniel Corbin. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Wilco Electronic Systems, an integrator of intelligent security access technologies. For over 40 years, Wilco has been dedicated to providing affordable cable television and broadband services to underserved communities. In addition, Wilco also is a provider of advanced telecom and technology offerings to commercial real estate offices, multifamily, multi-use housing developments, and as well as industrial spaces throughout the Philadelphia region. Under Ms. Daniels' leadership, she spearheaded the historic acquisition of Wilco's cable division to Comcast in 2018, which allowed for the influx of new technologies to enter public housing communities throughout Philadelphia. And she also is the founder of Mogulette, which she built as an organization that partners with anchor institutions to help bridge diversity, disparities in all facets of innovation and technology. Welcome, Brigitte Daniel Corbin. And next to Brigitte is my partner in crime, Sherrell Dorsey. She is the CEO of The Plug. She's the founder and CEO of The Plug, a digital news and insights platform covering the Black innovation economy. Her work has been featured in Vice, The Washington Post, Seattle Times, The Information, and more. Sherrell has been a contributing writer for notable publications like Columbia Journalism Review, Fast Company, Black Enterprise, and others. In 2018, she was named an Inspiring Woman in Tech by CNET and Most Creative People in Business by Adweek in 2021. And so I say she's my partner in crime because Sherrell and I, The Plug and WURD, are doing a collaboration covering the Black and brown tech economy and community here in Philadelphia. So you'll hear Sherrell and other folks from The Plug on WURD periodically talking about the Black tech and innovation economy in Philadelphia. So welcome, Sherrell Dorsey.
Thank you for having me.
And on the end is Mutale Nkonde. She is the CEO of AI for the People, a noted AI policy analyst and researcher. Nkonde writes widely and speaks at conferences worldwide about race and technology. She is currently advising the product teams at Google, TikTok, and a new startup, Seeker, on anti-racist design, as well as running AI for the People, a nonprofit that uses journalism, television, and film to add a technical analysis to racial justice discourse. She is an affiliate at the Digital Civil Society Lab at Stanford and was a former fellow at the Berkman Klein Center of Internet and Society at Harvard, as well as being a member of the Aspen Society of Fellows. Welcome, Mutale and Nkonde. All right.
Great bio here.
So we have a star-studded panel.
Women, you do too much.
And right, that's
what it's all about.
We were just like women. We do too much sometimes.
We do too much.
I just got tired listening to all of that.
We do too much.
Is that me?
Just for the purpose of.
So
Right.
I would just say we do what needs to be done.
That is true.
We do what needs to be done.
That too.
So I want to start off by each of you giving kind of a short overview of your work and tell us about your personal journey launching your company or stepping into the top leadership of your company and just some of the highlights. So I'll start with you, Tiffanie Stanard.
Ooh, the long journey. I'll try to shorten it. So I've been full-time entrepreneur my entire adult life now. I've been in technology my entire adult life now, so almost 20 years, which is crazy. And I started in, doing a lot of marketing events, got into technology, became a front-end developer from a bad experience with a developer that I needed help with on my website, and he would charge me every single time I needed to make a change. I'm like, can you just teach me how to do this? So when I started doing that, and I started offering that as a service when I realized most people did not know how to update their website, and this was before, updating on WordPress and Squarespace and all of that stuff.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Can we kind of keep it down a little bit so that we can hear the panel? We want to just focus on the panel. So go ahead.
Sure. So been in technology for many years and helping from small to large companies understand technology. And then I got into vendor management. So managing of businesses that you make a purchase from is basically vendor management. And I started working a lot at, large corporations, helping them, find better relationships with their suppliers, diversify their suppliers. So any minority-owned, women-owned businesses, hey, you need to make sure that Comcast is purchasing from you or whatever large company is within your city. So I started doing that. I did that for many years and then ended up launching Stimulus to really digitize that process. Large companies don't have an amazing process to work with smaller to medium-sized companies. So we're basically streamlining that process to help companies search, evaluate, and select great companies, but then also diversify who they're working with. So making sure that you're choosing companies based upon their experience and based upon the fact that you're trying to support the companies in your city. So we've been working on Stimulus for a while, and we're finally getting to the point where we have the traction that we need. We just closed on $2.5 million, and now, thank you.
That's amazing. That's huge.
Thank you. So our total raise for this company has been 3.5, and as great as it sounds, it's still a very small piece of the pie if you understand technology, if you understand growing a business, that people, my counterparts, white males, that have raised 10, 15, 20 million for half of the work that we have done over the last few years. So that's a lot of that journey where, we just talked about hearing our resumes and hearing our background. We do so much because we have to sometimes, and you're adding to your resume, you're adding to your background. Sometimes you're getting 2 to 3 degrees just to show your experience and your worth. Even though I can tell you I've been doing this for 20 years, that's not enough. So it's making sure that you're, showcasing that to the world, and that's sometimes the hard part about it. You're crazy educated, you can teach anybody anything, but it's a lot of extra effort to get half of, amount that you want to get within your industry.
Absolutely, and just to underscore that the disparities, a statistic says that from the National Center for Women and Information and Technology has stated that of the 25% of all women working in tech, just 3% of them are black women. A study conducted by British Computer Society also supports this claim that black women account for only 0.7% of all IT roles. And so we'll get into the disparity around funding and investing, because we know what you just said, you should be getting way more than 2.5 million or 3.5 million. So Brigitte, tell us, you are part of a legacy. You're part of a family business, which of course we share that. Talk about your journey, kind of taking over the family business and what you've brought to it.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I think I always like to start off the story of Wilco by saying, if anyone has heard of the Black Cable Company in Philadelphia, that's Wilco. That's what people know us by. So my father started this business in the 70s when cable and wiring was first becoming a part of the infrastructure of buildings of Philadelphia. That was when cable was the new technology. It was what people used to entertain. And we had provided that service to a lot of very Class A, which are very luxury multifamily, but then we also had the really honorable opportunity to also provide exclusively for public housing authorities, communities. So we had a very interesting perspective of being able to have access and provide access to different types of really demographics. And I think for what we do and what we are known for, the undergird of that, however, is the wiring and really where that comes from. So when we had an acquisition of our cable subscribership around maybe 5 years ago, we're now deep diving back into and really pivoting our focus back into the roots of what I was just talking about, being able to wire multifamily, wire buildings, wire communities, because now everyone is now using their cell phone as the gateway, right? That's the new cable box. That's the new director of your home for your smart technology. That is the new wave of where we're going for automation, which I think is so key because it really spans against housing. It goes against, you use it in your industries. If you were building this building, you would need our services because it's the bloodline for how people are going to get information around, facilities. So it's an interesting movement to go from Wilco 0.1 to now Wilco 2.0. And I think it's a challenge and a labor of love, as any family business is, but it's such an honor because not that many people get a chance to do that and then put their spin on it. And that spin comes with ups and downs and challenges, but we'll get into this afternoon. But I wouldn't do anything else. And it's exciting time because what we do is going to hit Tiffanie and what Sherrell does and what Mutale does and what WURD does because we're the blood underneath how it all happens. So I'm happy to be here and to share more about that.
Yeah, and I think we saw so much during the pandemic when 2020 hit, like everything became centered around technology. I mean, it was before that, but I mean, it's in a whole different way. With the way that we work. We are all through Zoom or through, and if you don't have good broadband or you don't have good wireless connectivity, you can't bank, you can't do your healthcare, you can't do a ton, basic services.
Right.
When your internet goes out, you're like, it's like your electricity is going out.
It is a utility.
It is an essential service.
And it's essential.
So this is like, and the fact that all of you are steeped in this industry is huge because you're going to bring more humanity, more sensitivity, more cultural relevance to
equity.
More
equity as well.
More equity to this pivotal industry. So Sherrell, Dorsey, tell us about your journey to the plug.
Absolutely. So I'm from Seattle originally. My grandfather left Detroit to work at Boeing. He did not have a high school education, but got a vocational certificate at the Detroit Electronics Training Program, got hired by Boeing in the 50s when Boeing started to hire black workers, and that ushered him into the black middle class. Absolutely. And he was the one that bought me and my cousins our first computers. And that really sparked this interest in technology. Like I said, my grandfather did not have a high school education, but he had a hard work ethic. And so he would sit us in front of the computer, and y'all remember Mavis Beacon? We used to have to do Mavis Beacon every time we went to Grandpa's house. And he would get the CD-ROMs on anatomy and biology and math, and he couldn't sit there and tell us what to do, but he knew that the computer was gonna teach us. So I credit my grandfather as my first technophile, introducing us to technology, and later on, being in Seattle, my proximity to Microsoft I got a chance to learn how to code in high school in the hood from a converted storefront. So I know there's Coded by Kids and programs like that here in Philly. I went to a program like that in early 2000s and learned how to code. And every summer I worked for Microsoft and got to save money for college, where I was taught by Black engineers and programmers and women and folks across ages and sexual orientations. So when I got into the workforce and there weren't people that looked like me, I was so confused. Because I was like, all I know is diverse innovators. And in the media, no one was asking us what we thought about the future of technology. It was only about our usage. And it wasn't smart reporting. And so when I decided to launch The Plug, I had already been interviewing folks who made their money in construction and government contracts, who were starting to become angel investors into new age businesses. So even when y'all talk about like the family business, folks who were taking their family business into the technology age, and I just ran with, hey, what if we started collecting data on Black innovation? What would it be like if we could create the Bloomberg of Black insights? And then when companies started asking us, well, what are Black people doing in this space? How do we start finding Black folks in cloud, Black folks in clean energy, renewable energy? We realized we were onto something. And at the end of the day, all of this for me, it's like, yes, like building a multi-million-dollar business, being able to hire and support Black journalists and storytellers is amazing. At the end of the day, for me, it is fundamentally changing what we think and we call genius. Because traditionally, especially in media, we've only asked Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates what they thought about the world, right? We haven't always asked people that look like us what we think and how we build and how we move forward. And so that really was the impetus behind The Plug and the work that we're doing, and even the software that we're starting to build out now.
Excellent, excellent. All right. So Mutale and Nkonde, tell us about AI for the people and your work.
So first of all, I'm so honored to be on this panel. So thank you, ladies. You're deeply inspiring. So my name's Mutale Nkonde. I do two things that I'm going to tell you about. The first is a nonprofit that I run that really helps companies, media, television, ordinary people really understand what we are talking about when we're speaking about artificial intelligence and smart technologies, which are great in many ways. They help us turn on our cars, they help us, do a manner of conveniences, but they also promote and advance anti-Black racism in specific ways. So I do that work, but then the other work I've been able to do coming from that are taking the insights and the research that I've done on the AI side and going into companies around and helping them design better companies. Because I'm certainly somebody that believes when we should all know what the problem is, but the problem doesn't actually mean anything if you don't have a solution. And how I got to that was actually through journalism. I started my career in television, and I was doing science and tech reporting. And so I'm older than Sherrell, so when Sherrell was in a storefront in the 2000s, being a kid, I was a full-grown adult in a job. And in that job, I was introduced to a new technology at the time, facial recognition, and how it was being used in sports. They were looking through I grew up in the UK, and in the UK there's a huge violence problem with sports, so they were using facial recognition to try and spot who was going to be violent. But the issue was they were only spotting Black people. Now remember, I grew up in the UK where there is a 3% Black population, so you had to look real hard to find those Black people, and I was seeing white people doing a lot of violence, and I was like, what is the problem with this? Fast forward many years, I moved to the US, and I go to work for various media companies, and in 2008, I'm told that this guy, Barack Hussein Obama, is running for president. And I'm like, Hussein, he's never gonna win, but I'm in, what do I do? And I was placed on a Twitter team before Twitter was made public. So did that work, worked really well, came out. My daughter is with me now, not paying any attention, but at the time, she was tiny. She was in grade school, and they were telling me about technology, and you've got to get your kids to code, and you've got to get in. And like most black mothers, I was like, well, I'm not looking after this kid for the rest of my life. Let me get this kid to code. And ended up, my kid didn't learn to code, but I was recruited to Google. So through that recruitment was then put on teams to help them understand the racial justice angle with tech. Did that for a while. My work ended up being recognized. The MacArthur Foundation came to me, said that we will underwrite an organization if you start it, which is AI for the People, which I can speak about later. And then through that work, large tech companies started to come to me and say, we're building out these products. These are artificial intelligence products. How can we build them in such a way that when they release to market, they're gonna recognize black skin, or there is gonna be a voice assistant that has a black voice, or it's not, there are all of these different vulnerabilities. So I would say that my story is one of always saying yes, wanting to do the best for and by black people. And then very recently, because I was always just doing what I loved, the company I started by accident, a company actually now wants to acquire that. So I'm now on the other side to think about what will it look like when this IP that I've created and this work that I've created eventually gets acquired.
All right. Yeah, that's so you know, like each of your stories really resonates with me, because when we conceptualize Founders Day, it is focused on celebrating the legacy and the life of my father, Walter P. Lomax Jr., MD. And he was a physician, he was deeply invested in real estate, he was a philanthropist, but he was, like, I think in his heart, he was a raging entrepreneur. He loved business, and he understood that ownership was the pathway to black liberation, was the pathway to economic self-sufficiency, specifically for black people. So when we talk about the tech world, and we know that there are these vast wealth disparities along racial lines, let's talk a little bit about the vast disparity around funding. And I want to turn to you, Tiffanie, to speak to that, because you're living it. But we know that to the racial wealth gap, I heard or read something that said it'll take like 200 years to close the racial wealth gap based on how we're going right now. We're not going to do it through student loan forgiveness. We're not going to do it through, you know, these little programs, and that's good. I think it's a great thing. But the reality is through redlining, through all of the things that have been done to disenfranchise and impoverish black people, the racial wealth gap is massive. And the only way we begin to chip away at it is if we can create wealth in our communities. And I see all of the people up here as wealth creators. So talk about your journey, Tiffanie, Stanard, about like trying to get funded, and the obstacles you faced and how you overcame them.
Whew. Long journey, let's say that. So as we're thinking about, you know, even our next round and growing from there, the journey of getting to this place where we have now a multi-million-dollar startup, long journey. She's been a part of the journey the entire time. And I think for me was realizing that what we were building was needed in the market, because one, it was about helping larger companies make better purchasing decisions, but it was second part, restructuring capital back into underrepresented communities and black communities especially, because there's nothing worse than building a company and nobody's buying your product or service, right? And especially buying your product or service locally, or buying it in so small quantities that you can't actually hire anybody to grow past 1 or 2 people. So I'm always thinking of that when I'm growing out and building out this company, of like, who is underrepresented, who is not being purchased from. I don't care if you have a great company, the biases that are initially against you won't help you close that contract. So it's less than 1% of Black women raising funds. It's less than 1% of people of color getting contracts within corporate to government. So it's across that board. So with me in that process, my community of other women that had achieved it, our first initial investors that kept us going and gave us more money while we were trying to close our round, to venting to friends, getting through the process and making sure that I didn't give up. And that's probably the hardest part, because we've got a lot of no's, a lot of, disrespectful no's, let's say that. A lot of, challenging my experience, challenging my knowledge. No matter how much time that I put in, no matter how amazing my team was, no matter what the revenue I was bringing in, I still had to overprove myself. So even when I got to the 2.5, I still was like looking around like, did I do this? Is this done? Like, it was still like a crazy process, and I don't even think I celebrated the way I should have, because I was already thinking about we need more money, right? I got to a number and I was like, we still need more money. So, and as you hear the conversation about, economic downturn and everything else, I was like, that's for the white men that's getting billions of dollars. It ain't for us, because this dollar is going to be stretched regardless of what's happening in the economy. So we know how to stretch a dollar. Like, I raised $1 million prior to that, and I stretched that for like 3 or 4 years, right, to pay a team of 6 people. So I think for me, between, my spiritual value, my family, my friends, the people that support me, kept me going throughout this process to get here, and knowing that I can get from 2.5 to our next raise, we're raising $10 million.
Absolutely.
So we're going from there and there, and just knowing that from there, that you can do it, but you need to.
Absolutely.
Thank you. You just need your community around, and Sherrell's a new friend, and we're talking business hacks and just that journey of how do you get through that journey, and keeping your sanity throughout that journey. So it's a very difficult process. And I put down, when I closed, I said, fundraising is hard. Fundraising as a Black woman is hard. Fundraising in my industry of supply chain is hard, but it's not impossible. And I did achieve it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's amazing. And a lot of people, because WURD is coming up on 20 years, being 20 years old, and I always point to the fact that so many Black businesses don't have runway. Yeah. It took us probably 15 of those 20 years to figure out our business model. The only reason we had that long runway is because my father didn't have any debt. He was, he bought the station outright. We were able to get investors that were very generous and patient. And one of them is here, Jeff Brown. And so, very grateful to have runway, because a lot of Black businesses, if you have like a bad month, you could be out of business. Yes. And so that runway, I'll just keep calling it runway, is essential. So Brigitte, talk about the Philadelphia tech community a little bit, because you've been in it for a while. And there's a saying in Philly that says, Philly's a great place to work from, but not in.
Say it, yes.
You have to go someplace else to get validated before Philly will see you. Yeah. And I know you know, Tiffanie.
Or I like to think, if you can make it anywhere in Philly, you can make it really everywhere. Because there is we have an interesting, you got to prove yourself so hard to ourselves for Philadelphians to take you really a value base. But I think for Philadelphia, we're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel around really knowledge and respect of diversity, like what it means to have a diverse city of technologists, a diverse city of housing, of really just what inclusion and diversity, how it makes us better. And I think for a long time, not just Philly, but a lot of cities pushed back on that. And I COVID was probably one of those seminal moments that really made Philadelphians also take a look back financially on what we can do to now promote Black business. So, WRD and the Lomax companies, my father also gave runway and had no debt And that's a privilege. Not everybody has that. That's kind of something that other demographics have. We don't have that kind of alley-oop per se. And, you know, he came from the South. He started, you know, with like just picking cotton and then being able to then provide services when no one else did. North Carolina. So we have that, like a lot of these hard work ethic men came from the South and came up to the North to bring that kind of ingenuity. And I think he believed wholeheartedly that ownership is key. And I think that's what Philadelphians are seeing now. They're seeing more Black, intentional, let's give some more opportunities for alley-oops for Black business. Now, Tiffanie should absolutely be looking at $100 million for her platform. Absolutely. You know what I mean? Like, if she was a white male in her same position, she should be looking for $100 million. And she would get it easily. There's a lot of money out there right now. It is not a money problem. This is a who's going to get the money and what they're going to do with it problem. And we could get it. But we need to be able to like jump the hoops that not everyone in the house has, right? The government's trying to get their money back through COVID. This is a lot of inflation is that. But there's money out there to start businesses, and there's money out there to fund businesses, and there's money out there to sustain businesses. The cities and the organizations and the investors that see that as key are gonna win. And I think that's where Philadelphia is starting to shift, to see how it's going to help us as a majority city to have more Black ownership, platforms, publications, and new technologies coming around and being promoted and used and not just consumed, but invented for us. And I haven't seen that before in this way. So there's a good place to start.
Mm-hmm. So, Sherrell, you have The Plug, which is a media platform that is telling our stories and celebrating our successes and challenges and all of that. But I want to see if you can talk about, you know, Philly is known as the poorest big city in the nation. And I believe that technology could really be that equalizer, that thing that creates more jobs, more livable wages, more wealth creation. So talk about some of the reporting that you're doing with The Plug that allows us to imagine what technology can do for Black people.
Oh, absolutely. I love this question. I've always had a heart for Philly. I grew up coming here over the summer. So when my grandfather went to Seattle, my great aunt came here to Philly. So North Philly, 27th Street, 27th Avenue, did I say that right? North Philly? Okay, thank you. It's like I have cousins in Germantown. So I grew up being in Philly, you know, every other summer with my family. And as I started to spend more time here and start to understand some of the dynamics and the demographics, first of all, of course, like the city of brotherly love, there's so much community here. The challenge, and I've lived in about 7 different cities. I've lived in Newark, New Jersey. I've lived in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I've lived in Harlem. I've lived in Charlotte, Atlanta, Miami. One of the most common challenges is Black and brown communities have not been given the cheat codes to access and onboard into technology. We know that, right? We know that. So where my grandfather was able to purchase a computer for me and my cousin in the mid-90s, a lot of my friends were only getting access to a computer at the library at school. So when you talk about those family advantages, I realized how much of a privilege it was to just even be able to use a personal computer at home when it took years for other people to be able to afford one of those within their households. So one of the things that I also did at the top of this year, I published a book called Upper Hand, The Future of Work for the Rest of Us. And through my reporting and covering tech and investment and all of those things, what I realized is a lot of times we don't have the language and the information in order to know what is accessible to us to be able to get into tech. And the reason why tech is so critical is because literally a certificate can double the kind of income that you make. You can literally finish a certificate program and find a job that could start you off at $80K a year, just to start. But I realized that a lot of us, I don't come from a household of true technologists. Most of my folks worked in government, they worked in social services, and 20, 30 jobs at 30 years at a job and then retired. So the world that I entered into was very different. The kind of jobs that I entered into following college were very different. My grandfather, I'd be sitting in the living room on my laptop working, and he's like, "Don't you got to go to work? Why are you sitting here?" Like, he was very confused because he was a man that went to work every day at 8 a.m. and came home at 6 p.m. Very, very different. So for him to tell me how to enter the workforce and make money, it was a very different kind of generation. So with Upper Hand, taking our reporting and consolidating it and saying, hey, here are the black tech conferences you should be attending. If you save your money for the year and go to Afro Tech or go to Black in Tech or go to Black in AI, and you take your nieces, your nephews, your grandchildren, access to information is going to be critical. There have been important studies that have come out of Philadelphia around the black tech workforce. Even though Philly is one of the fastest growing tech environments, the representation of black tech workers is so low. That's the kind of reporting we're doing here on the ground, but also talking to the Tiffanie standards, of course wanting to talk to the Brigittes and covering the ground, because there are innovators right here in your communities, but we need to elevate those conversations. Because why? When you see yourself in these spaces, you think about the kids, and not even just the kids, those who are like my brother, who's re-entering society after being incarcerated, who needs to see someone who looks like him in a space that has never been presented to him, so that he can go and create a life and opportunity for himself and for his family. So in this book, I talk about Amazon Web Services has a certification program. Google Careers has certification programs. Verizon has an upskilling program. IBM, you can take free online certifications in data analytics. There's so much free information. You can pop into the library and find those resources. So when I think about the richness of Philly, when I think about the information share, what WURD is doing with livelihood, making connections to these resources. And when you were talking about, you know, the 200-year gap, racial wealth gap, it's like, well, we know where those 200 years went, right? We know why that gap exists. So we may not be able to get direct reparations, but there are free programs, free money that is out there, and a lot of times we just need to pass the word. No pun intended, but we just need to pass the word. Because if I tell you, listen, every young person in your life who is looking for an opportunity, tell them to go ahead and start Googling free certification programs. And tell them to start there. And tell them to be diligent. Come to the library every day for 3 months, 6 months. Finish that certification. And then go ahead and start looking for opportunities and jobs that are going to start at $80K. My little cousin got out of college and started making $115,000 with a $20,000 signing bonus. I was like, what? What is this? So part of it is that information share, and that's what Upper Hand, the book that I wrote, is really the cheat code. Here are all the jobs of the future. Here's how you go and access them. Here's the words that you need to know. Know what a hackathon is. Know what cloud computing is. Know what quantum computing is. Know what data analysis is. Just get the language so that you can go share when you're at the dinner table with your family, or you're at your house of worship, or you're sitting in a community center. You can have that conversation and share that knowledge and pass it on. And I think that Philly has that tremendous opportunity to take advantage of it.
Excellent. This is WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM Philadelphia. We are broadcasting live from 1901 Vine Street at the Free Library Central Branch. I'm Sara Lomax-Reese, President and CEO of WURD, and we are here with an amazing panel: Tiffanie Stanard, Brigitte Daniel Corbin, Sherrell, Dorsey, and Mutale Nkonde. And we're talking about Black women in tech, and the opportunities, the obstacles, the experiences. And so I want to go to you, Mutale. I want to just give a stat that kind of dovetails on what you were saying, Sherrell. It says, regarding recruitment bias that involves race and gender, Silicon Valley's tech workers consist of 83% men, with 93% of those being white men. So so Mutale, you have worked for Twitter, you have been with TikTok. I mean, you're in those spaces. Talk to us about how we get more Black people in those spaces and what you have done personally to navigate those spaces as a conscious Black woman.
Whew. How do we get in? So to dovetail on what Sherrell was saying, I tell everybody, we are in a knowledge economy. So the way the US is going to continue to be competitive going forward is the production of IP, so what you think and protecting it, and the trading of it. The reason I start with that
Can you
is
just define IP?
I'm sorry, intellectual property, so ideas. So the idea that has defined my career is that technology in its design can have racialized impacts. And the way I verified that idea is that I went and did research. I went to Stanford and Harvard and all those fancy places and were able to say, in the criminal justice system, when we use tools, when we use algorithms, more Black people go to jail. In the mortgage market, when we use tools instead of looking at the applicant, guess what? Those people are not getting their mortgages, and on and on and on. So the way that I always tell people to come in is figure out what new idea or what new information are you going to bring into that environment and take it to your hiring manager. The reason I say that is within the tech space, if you can show somebody that you are somebody who can think differently, that makes you really valuable, because one of the first things I was told when I first went to work in the tech, when I first went to Google, the first thing I was told is if you want to succeed in the future, create it. And that was so instrumental to me.
Say that again.
If you want to succeed in the future, you want to create it. The same way, Sara, your father created this radio station, and Brigitte, your father, created that company, that secured a future for your families. You are not dependent on anybody else to make sure a dollar comes in. The second thing I would say about those companies is that it's definitely going to be hostile, because the minute you show up, they're not expecting you, they're not looking for you, and they're not trying to help you. So I always said, do whatever you need to do in that company within 2 years and make enough money within 2 years and make enough money for 4. And the way that you do those two things is having a plan. So even when I was working in companies, I knew ultimately I would take my information, my intelligence, my genius to make money for myself. But if I had to get froggy and jump real quick, I would still be good. So I was very good at negotiating up front. And I would always go to like white men from Europe, because they don't really know the racism. I mean, they're racist, but not quite like the ones here. So I would find somebody from Germany or somebody from Poland, and I would be like, so Jan, how much are you making? We talk about money in America, and they would tell me, and then I would go and ask for that. But then add a third, because as a Black woman, I was being paid a third less. I needed to negotiate, and then end up with a big figure. With that anecdote, the other thing I think I can't speak English now. The other thing Black people need to do in tech environments, specifically Black people like me, is that once I got into those companies, there are not a lot of African Americans. They are Black people that have come from other places that they would prefer to hire. So I would always be like, happy for the job and all, but I live in Brooklyn, New York. I don't understand why you just didn't go downstairs and find, look, the Black people everywhere. I don't understand why we're not hiring. And I start to agitate from within, because what happens is, if Black people, different types of Black people, are not going to advocate for each other in those spaces, guess what? You are going to need a Black Lives Matter moment, quick, fast, and in a hurry, and you want Al Sharpton to come when you call. So that's also another part of it, because I think when we talk about Black people in tech, we also need to de-aggregate and not become complicit. Quick analogy, I'm getting awarded, I'm like a global human rights something. I'm getting an award next month, right? Something, very big deal, global. And I'm looking down the list, and there are 4 Black women representing the UK, the US, and it was so funny, because I was like, where's Sherrell Dorsey? And they were like, no, this person, that person, the other person. And I was like, none of our families were in this country before the year 2000. Why is it that you're awarding us? And these are cash prizes, because those non-cash prizes, unless I'm getting some other thing, I'm not really about the non-cash prize. You can keep that. But once I cash the check, I then went back, and I'm going to be on the selection committee next year, to say that if we're not awarding everyone, if we're not looking for genius everywhere, then we're not going to have the type of industry that we need, and cities like Philadelphia are not going to be able to compete, and I just don't know that that conversation has had enough.
Can I
Go
jump
ahead,
in?
Sherrell. Yes.
I just want to jump in as well, because you know, a lot of us have worked for really great brands, right? You know, the top companies I mentioned. My first job was Microsoft. I went over to Uber and Google Fiber and like all the fancy places. And, you know, like Mutale, like get your coins, save, get your equity, right?
Right.
Start building up your equity, negotiate those stock options. I talk about that in my book as well, because I left about 20 grand on the table not knowing how to negotiate my stock options. That's for another day. But I also want us to think about the fact that both of you had parents or fathers who created a legacy for you. And the one thing that I think about a lot, especially in our reporting, is, and why we hyper-focus and center our reporting and our coverage on Black businesses and Black innovation, is that at some point we have to stop asking institutions that weren't built for us and weren't designed by us for opportunity. So what I think about it is, I would love for my future children to work for Stimulus. Like, I want Stimulus to be a long-lasting, lifelong company that goes public, and my kids are getting out of college and saying, oh yeah, like we got a job at Stimulus. And they're making announcements on LinkedIn like, I'm so proud to join this team. And like the way that we are excited to announce getting jobs at these larger conglomerates, we need to do the same for our Black businesses. So I think about, thank you, ma'am. But I think so much about the fact that for the last 3 years, I have provided medical benefits, full-time salaries for Black people. I have Black employees who took a risk to come and work with me, who left incredible careers, who left the CNNs, who left Forbes, who left, the Weather Channel to come and work for me. This little small media company, Black-owned media company. And I think about like, oh yeah, yes. Not only are these folks working for me, but we're building the business together. If I'm gonna give somebody equity in my company outside of investors, I wanna work with Black investors. I wanna work with Black employees that I can provide equity to. And when we sell, we can all get rich and go be on an island and go do it again for another Black business. So how do we keep forwarding that kind of legacy throughout our communities?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that there's a lot that is being shared today, and I just want to like take a moment to acknowledge that creating something is different than creating something that lasts. Yeah. And so, you know, we are here celebrating the legacy of my father as the founder of WURD, and him giving me, the family, the community, the runway to create. But it's hard as hell to stay in business. I just want everyone to know, like what you know, like Brigitte's dad, he created this, but continuing to keep it alive and to grow it and to expand it is not nothing.
To change it? Oh my God.
Yeah, so I think that as so often when we talk on these panels, we kind of leapfrog over kind of the complexity and the grind. And I tell people a lot that, you know, when I started running WURD, I can't tell you all how many sleepless nights I had not knowing how I was going to make payroll. We never missed a payroll. We never missed a payroll. We never missed, but like real talk, I was calling on I was like, it's Tuesday and Thursday is, I have no idea. Yes. No idea.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah. Yeah.
but we never missed a payroll.
That is so important.
Yeah, so.
But can I also?
It is. I always say, like, I get asked a lot doing podcasts and interviews, and like, what is your biggest accomplishment? I was like, I've accomplished a lot, but I have never missed payroll, and that's like my number one, because there's nothing like,
Telling you,
like
man.
to Sherrell, what she mentioned of like people coming to work with you, and we now have almost a team of 10, and we're still hiring, and to have them full time, they're, you know, grown people with families and kids, and to be able to pay them full time, pay for their, you know, healthcare, pay for their family's healthcare, which is a lot.
It is a lot. Healthcare is expensive.
Like, pension for, you know, equity to come in, like, it's a lot to run a business. And that's probably my biggest accomplishment, is making sure that my team is good.
But the other thing I would say, and on my for-profit side, I see this, knowing when it's not good money.
Yeah.
Because we get more work than we can do. Yeah. And sometimes I think the hardest thing for me has been turning away that client, because you know that long term it's going to compromise you. They're going to be too difficult. They are not going where you want to go. We have many instances where our work may be stolen. So that's hard too. And having to do all of those things like payroll.
So we have about 10 minutes or less, and I want to talk specifically about what it is to be a Black woman entrepreneur. And we talk about the challenges, the hardships, the obstacles, but what do we uniquely bring to our work, to tech, whatever, that is uplifting, is unique, is inspiring? So not just like, oh Lord, how am I gonna make it to tomorrow? But what are we bringing to the world and to our work that is unique as Black women?
Yeah, I love that, because we definitely gonna do the woe is me for a minute, but I think for me it's, you know, as women, Black women, you can stretch $1, whether you want to or not, but it teaches you creativity. It teaches you how to, when you get the money you deserve, how to make it last and how to do a lot with it. Good or bad sometimes, when it takes that while to get the money that you deserve, but it definitely showcases how to, you know, be creative. You don't run out of money. You see millions of dollars going to these white male companies, and they run out of money. Like, how do you run out of money when you just got like $100 million? Like,
throwing parties. We know how they run out of money throwing parties.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I'm just like, I just got $1 million, and I was, you know what I mean? And then getting 2.5, I was like, I can make this last at least 2-3 years, but I don't want to, but I can. So I think that, you know, being able to stretch money and know how to spend it, I think it's also that creativity. I started doing these events with different Black and brown founders, women founded, focused on supply and demand, like the real cost of doing business, and inviting them to speak on subject matters that they're never asked to speak on. So from margins to supply chain issues to successes to, hey, I'm innovating in a space that's never been innovated before by a Black woman, right? So really elevating their voices, and then that community, because when you're not always getting the support you want from other people, you start creating that community. And just came back from Martha's Vineyard, hanging out with Sherrell and other women, and just getting those life hacks of how to really grow and turn your business into, you know, what you're trying to turn it into, creating your personal brand, getting paid to speak, all of those different things. So we bring a lot of that creativity, knowing how to stretch $1, and that community, that if you had all the money in the world, would you still focus on community as much? That's always the question, but I value my community because it's got me to this point, and being able to not only see them succeed, but they've been helping me succeed.
Brigitte.
I mean, I just think, just to Tiff about community, there's no other entity like a Black woman, anything. There's nothing like what we are, where we've come, why we created, like there's nothing like it. So you gotta have to have that mindset to know that wherever you go, you are gonna add absolute value, and they should be blessed to give you money or hire you. Yeah. And that's not easy, because you're going to be chopped down all the time, because knowing that we think that way and that this is the case, but we're also the lowest on the totem pole of it all.
Yeah.
So you have to overcome, you know, that stigma. And then you're a woman, so if you're married or you have children, you got to add that onto it, and then you got to also then add on. You may not get
just
money.
That minor thing. You just got to add that on.
You got to add that on.
You got to do.
Got to add all that stuff. Why I was speeding down along, Lincoln Drive, making sure I got her because I had to make sure my 9-month-old had something to eat because I'm going to still do that too, right? So there's that. So balancing all of that, so, being able to still thrive as a woman who, we're an entity, like we are, to be able to survive that historic avalanche of oppression to Black women and then still have all this sitting up here, like why would you not think that we could be beautiful for your entity, your business, or your company? So we're automatically going to bring impact, and not impact like community, but impact of the holistic, what it means to just thrive and bring up with you, because we have to. And I think that's important to believe and talk to yourself every day with as you wake up and have to battle the challenges. But the opportunities are, we are it. This is our time.
Yes.
This is our time, and we should relish and leverage it.
Yeah.
Yes, Sherrell.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Entrepreneurship, I think, as a whole is the most incredible personal and professional development tool that you will ever lead yourself through. I'm a better person because I have to be a leader every single day. If I want my team to do the kind of work that I want them to do, if I need my family's support, it requires deep emotional intelligence. It requires the ability to maintain and sustain relationships, to problem solve. I feel like it has made me smarter, more empathetic, more oriented around the collective. And that is what I really appreciate about this journey, and particularly being a Black woman in this space. I will say that it has been at the hands of other Black women and men who have gotten me into the doors of companies and organizations that would never have looked twice at my business. So probably about 80 to 90% of the deals we've gotten was because there was another person that looked like me that walked me in because they were working on a team or they were leading an initiative and they had a budget and they said, I love what you're doing. I subscribe to your work. I want to bring you into this initiative, and here's a check, and here's what you should ask for. Time and time again, it was other Black and brown folks who said, I see you. And that's one of the superpowers that we have. We have the ability to see each other and to say, hey, I'm gonna show you how to do this right. I'm gonna show you how to sit in this meeting. Here's what you need to say. And these are people I've never met in my life, haven't said 2 words to them, but they saw me and they took the initiative to say, I wanna help you succeed because I see how you're impacting others. And I, like so many of us, we go and we speak across the country. And it can be very lonely when you are literally the only person that looks like you on these stages in these rooms. There's one time I was speaking at a major tech conference and I just felt completely alone. And I'm like in the American Express lounge preparing for this big talk. And literally some of the service folks who were working the stage, it's the only time you see the Black folks, right, is they're in the service areas. But this older gentleman walked up to me, he said, listen, I don't know what's going on. He's like, but you're gonna be okay. And he brought me some water, and I just had to cry, because I was just like, Lord, thank you for sending my surrogate aunts and uncles in spaces. And I kid you not, every time I would step off stage, there'd be one Black person in the audience of this sea of all white folks who would come up to me and say, can I take a picture with you? I wanna send this to my daughter. I wanna send this to my son. And it reminds you, I am here because Jerry Dorsey got off that bus in Seattle, and even though he fought in the Korean War, he didn't get that GI Bill. He made a way, and he stayed at the YMCA, and he worked at that assembly line, and he bought me that computer, and he made sure I got to college. And so me sitting in this room, even if I'm the only one, I'm not going to be the last, and I'm going to keep paving the way. So that for me is a superpower I walk in with.
Yes, it is. Mutale and Nkonde.
Quickly, so as an entrepreneur, I've always told people I've been paid really well to do what I love because I've made up every single job I've had. And part of that is because I know how to think between the lines. And I know how to identify what's not being done and then create it. The other thing I would say as well is in terms of, particularly when I work with brands, large tech companies, similar to Sherrell, every tech contract I've ever got is because Black employees at that company follow my work. And because they follow my work, they then want to institute it into their practices. And I will never, at first, I didn't know what to charge. And then this woman who was bringing me in said, ask them for $500,000. They got it. And I was like, what? Because I would have asked for $10. I didn't know. Like, they were just reading my work. They had watched a YouTube video. I didn't know. But it's that type of intelligence, particularly when you think that the type of work that we all do connect to future marketplaces. So because of changing demographics, if you're marketing to a bunch of white people in Iowa, guess what? Demography says that all of those people are going to be black and brown. Just like white people are just not having babies. I don't know what to tell you, but it's changing the marketplace. No, seriously, it's changing the marketplace, and that then becomes value. The other thing that I would say in terms of the joy of entrepreneurship for me is that I have had a feast or famine career. It's so funny that you talk about going to Martha's Vineyard. So my daughter will tell, if she's awake, will tell you, like, we finally made it. We finally had the money to do it this summer. So I was with my kids and I was like, remember when we were in that 1-bedroom apartment and there was one bed and I slept on the couch for 4 years and we were eating ramen? Well, we're in Martha's Vineyard now with the, with the Obamas, but it's those material things that don't mean everything. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, a company paid for me to take that trip too. I'm still cheap. No. Listen. I saw those prices, not for me, but for them. And but those things are in the material. But there is also a spiritual side to the journey that I've decided to make. It has been high risk, but there's nothing better than defining the future that you're going to have, deciding how you're going to move forward, creating opportunities for other people, and knowing that even on your lowest day, God has you and God will keep you, and to see that happening again and again.
All right, sorry, multitasking. Thank you, Mutale. So we are going to wrap this conversation up. I feel there is such an important part too, because something you talked about was how do we as Black women get our value? Because whether it's a salary or investment, like a lot of times when you said 500,000, somebody told you ask for 500,000,
and that wasn't an investment, that was revenue. Well, so they didn't take any of my business.
So often we don't know how to put a dollar sign on our value, and we will, because we're used to a scarcity mindset. Real quick as we wrap up, I started a second company called URL Media, which stands for Uplift, Respect, and Love, and WURD is a part of URL Media. URL Media is a network of Black and Brown owned media organizations from across the country with global aspirations, and WURD is a part of that network. And my business partner, Mitra Kalita, she is an Indian woman. She worked at CNN and lots of big companies. And she just has a frame of reference about money that is foreign to me. She is asking for, big dollars all the time, everywhere. And I'm like, what? Because I'm used to a scarcity mindset, quite frankly. I'm used to, like you said, how do I stretch like a dollar? All that's been my whole career. So we have to understand our value and be able to put a dollar sign on it in ways that I don't think we as Black people, Black women, have been socialized to do. So that's our next panel, how we do that. But thank you all so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming.